I'm Jessica Rudnicki. Welcome back to Connected. Today I have the privilege of speaking with Geoff Mercurio, Communications Specialist at Reynolds and Reynolds, about communication strategies with customers and how using a single system can improve the customer experience. Let's get connected. Hi, Geoff. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today. It's nice to have you on.
Hey, good morning, Jessica. Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. So this interview is interesting because recently you wrote an article about an experience you had calling into a dealership for touch-up paint. It was a huge hit on our blog, Fuel. Can you refresh my memory on that story a little bit, and maybe for anyone in the audience who hasn't had a chance to read it, kind of talk a little bit about it?
Sure. So my daughter, when she was younger, liked to go out and ride her bike. And there's a bunch of kids in the neighborhood. She would take her bike out of the garage and put her bike back in the garage. Well, we have a very small garage. And so she would take it between the cars, and her handlebars would inevitably drag up and down the sides of my wife's Pathfinder. My wife really likes her car. And at one point, she gave me that look like, you need to fix this. So I figured I would call the dealership and try and get some touch-up paint, right? So I called the dealership and I asked for the parts department because that's who typically has the paint. So when I called the parts department, they said, I need the VIN of your vehicle. And I said, yeah, I don't really have the VIN. My wife's not here right now, but it's the only gray 2013 Pathfinder that you guys sell. And she said, I'm sorry, I got to have the VIN number. I said, well, I've done service there for over 6 years. So if you could just look me up in the system, I'm sure you can find the VIN number. And they said, yeah, we're sorry. Parts doesn't talk to the service department where you've done your service. So I'm going to have to send you to service. So I said, so you're going to have to send me to service to get the information, and then they're going to transfer me back to you? And she said, yes. So she puts me on hold. I wait. I talk to the service person. They look me up in the system. I write the number down physically on a piece of paper. She transferred me back to parts. I have to hold again because they're with another customer. And then I finally gave them the information so that they could get this one little piece of paint for my car.
So as a repeat customer, how did it feel that that dealership didn't have your information or didn't have it available while you were on the phone?
It was extremely frustrating. And the reason it's frustrating is because, there's an easier way to do things for everybody involved, not just the customer, but for the associate at the dealership. Dealerships should be looking to eliminate these kinds of issues altogether. Not knowing your customers or being able to answer a simple question quickly obviously detracts from the customer experience and provides poor CSI. It's inefficient for several staff members to spend 5 to 10 minutes on a call that could take, like a minute with the right information in the customer profile.
Absolutely. So those are all good points that you mentioned. And to me, it sounded like maybe the dealership that you called didn't have systems that communicated with one another. So could you talk a little bit more about how adding that type of communication piece could help to alleviate some of those issues that you mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. So if the systems had been in place, the dealership would have been able to greet me by name. And I don't want to overlook how huge that is alone. Honestly, it sets the tone for the entire call. They would already know what vehicle I was calling about. My VIN number would already be at their fingertips from any department, regardless of where I called. My paint color would have been a few clicks away through their searchable inventory. It's little things like that that contribute to the overall experience, not just for me, but for really for any consumer.
Definitely. And obviously doing it that way, the way that it should be done, certainly is a much better and faster experience than what you went through. So because COVID is on everyone's mind right now, states are just now starting to reopen and dealerships are starting to allow customers back into their showrooms and back into service. Do you think that there are any long-term applications from the pandemic that might be important for dealers to consider along these lines?
Absolutely. I think that customers are going to have to adjust to living more remotely and distance from everyone. This is kind of be the new normal for a little bit. And, more people are going to avoid in-person meetings, which makes the phone call even more important than it was before. It's going to be crucial that they have a phone system that's connected to all areas of the dealership. I mean, imagine having a phone system that provides instant information to the customer, their vehicle, their service history, marketing that they've received, all, in one spot. All of those things are going to make the over-the-phone experience at the dealership head and shoulders. It's going to put them head and shoulders above their competition. And remember, customers don't just compare car dealerships to other dealerships when they go to customer service experiences, right? They compare you to every experience they've ever had. They're comparing you to Amazon and Apple and Chick-fil-A. Those businesses are raising the bar for our dealerships.
Absolutely, 100% agree. So great advice. Geoff, while we have the audience, is there anything else that you would like to mention, or any best practices dealerships could utilize right now to help kind of streamline communication with their customers?
You know, a couple of things. One, try and make sure your employees can always be easily reached via an extension or a cell phone or something. You always want to try and get your customers to your associates as quickly and efficiently as possible. Secondly, you want to make sure that your voicemails are updated with a proper greeting and that they're checked frequently. There's nothing more frustrating for a customer than to send to a voicemail and it's a generic message. You have no idea if you got to the right place or not, or if someone's ever going to call you back. Also, you want to make sure the customers can always speak to a live person, even if the intended party isn't available. Always give them that option to speak to someone at the exact moment that they call.
Great tips. Thank you so much for sharing those. And thank you again for speaking with us today. I really appreciate it.
Sure, I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That was great information on how using a single system can really bring value to your customers and eliminate some of the needless pain of doing business at a dealership. If you're new to the podcast, make sure you subscribe to get weekly notifications. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday.